Mafia. Boss gets a late-night call. A waitress finds his daughter unconscious. What would you do if the most dangerous man in Chicago answered the phone and you were the stranger holding his dying child in your arms? It was almost midnight when Nora Bennett, a broke waitress with rain in her hair and $11 in her pocket, heard a small cry behind a laundromat on the south side. She should have kept walking. In that neighborhood, people survived by minding their own business. But when she found a little girl lying cold on the pavement whispering for her father, Nora made the one call that could either save a life or end her own. Stay with this story because one act of kindness will shake a mafia empire, heal a broken child, and awaken a heart buried in darkness. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. But before Nora Bennett ever heard that child crying in the alley, before Mason Callahan's name appeared on a cracked phone screen like a warning from hell, she was only trying to make it to the last bus home. 24 hours earlier, Nora woke to the sound of her apartment window rattling in the wind. For a few seconds, she stayed still beneath her thin blanket, listening to the city breathe through the broken glass. Somewhere below, a car alarm screamed and died. A couple argued on the sidewalk. A siren wailed in the distance, then faded toward the expressway. Chicago did not wake gently on the south side. It coughed, cursed, bled, and kept moving. Nora opened her eyes to a ceiling stained brown from an old leak her landlord had promised to fix 6 months ago. The room was so cold that her breath appeared in front of her in faint white clouds. The radiator in the corner knocked like a trapped animal, but it gave off almost no heat. She reached for her phone on the milk crate beside her mattress and checked the time. 5:12 in the morning. 4 hours of sleep. That was better than usual. Her body protested when she sat up. Her lower back ached from standing too long. Her feet were swollen. Her hands were rough and red from dish soap, bleach, and winter air. Beneath her ribs, an old scar pulled tight when she moved too quickly, a permanent reminder of the night a robber had come into Daisy's diner with a knife and left Nora bleeding behind the counter. She pressed one hand against the scar until the ache passed. Then she looked at the envelope on the floor. Final notice. The words sat there in thick black ink, blunt and cold. She had read the letter so many times the paper had softened at the folds. 2 months behind on rent. Payment required immediately. Eviction proceedings to begin. No exceptions. Nora laughed once, but there was no humor in it. No exceptions. People with money loved saying that. No exceptions. No extensions. No second chances. As if life were a clean little contract and not a storm that could break through your roof while you were already drowning. She stood and crossed the room to the kitchenette. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet. In the cabinet there was half a sleeve of crackers, 1 dented can of beans, and 2 packets of instant coffee she had taken from the diner without telling anyone. She stared at them for a long moment, then chose the coffee. Food could wait. Caffeine could not. The tap water came out cloudy at first. She let it run, then filled a chipped mug and microwaved it for a minute. While it heated, she opened her banking app. $8.62. Nora stared at the number until the screen dimmed. Her rent was due. Her electric bill was overdue. A debt collector had called 11 times yesterday about the hospital bill from the stabbing. Another had left a voicemail about the loan Tyler had convinced her to sign before disappearing with every dollar. Tyler used to call her brave. Back then she thought he meant it as love. Now she understood that some people only praised your strength because they planned to use it. The microwave beeped. Nora drank the bitter coffee standing up because sitting down again might convince her not to get back up. She showered in water that never reached warm, dressed in her diner uniform, and pulled on the only pair of shoes she owned. The soles had split months ago. She had cut cardboard from an old cereal box and tucked it inside to keep her socks from touching the pavement. It did not work well, but it worked enough. Before leaving, she paused in front of the small mirror above the sink. A woman with tired green eyes looked back at her. Dark hair tied into a careless knot, pale skin, a bruise on her wrist from a customer who had grabbed her too hard the night before. She looked older than 27. She looked like someone life had been chewing on for years. Just one more day, she whispered. It was the same thing she told herself every morning. Not because she believed tomorrow would be better, because one more day was sometimes the only promise she could keep. Nora locked the apartment door and stepped into the hallway. The building smelled of old smoke-fried grease and damp carpet. Mrs. Alvarez from the second floor was already leaving for her cleaning job, her gray hair tucked beneath a wool hat. "You eat today, mija?" Mrs. Alvarez asked. Nora smiled. Later. Mrs. Alvarez gave her the look older women gave when they knew you were lying but loved you enough not to say it out loud. "Take this." She pressed a foil-wrapped biscuit into Nora's hand. Nora's throat tightened. "I can't take your food." "You can, and you will." "Mrs. Alvarez." The older woman shook her head. "Pride does not keep you warm." Nora wanted to argue. Instead, she held the biscuit like it was something fragile. "Thank you." Mrs. Alvarez touched her cheek. "You have good eyes, Nora. Don't let this city steal them." Nora stepped out into the morning before the tears could rise. The bus was late as always. People waited beneath the shelter with their collars turned up and their faces closed off. A man slept on the bench with a newspaper over his chest. A teenage girl in a school uniform mouthed lyrics to a song only she could hear. Cars hissed past on wet pavement. Nora ate half the biscuit and saved the rest for later. At 7, she clocked in at Bellucci's, a small Italian restaurant downtown that smelled better than anywhere Nora had ever been allowed to eat. Garlic butter basil, warm bread. Her job was in the kitchen where the floor stayed slick and the steam soaked through her shirt before noon. The cooks moved around her fast, shouting for pans, plates, sauce knives. Nora kept her head down and washed dishes until her fingers wrinkled and stung. By 10, the lunch prep rush had begun. By 11, her stomach had folded in on itself from the smell of food she could not afford. The owner, Mr. Bellucci, came into the kitchen around noon. He was a heavy man with gold rings and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Nora, sweetheart," he said, standing too close. She kept scrubbing a pan. "Yes, sir." "You working at Daisy's tonight?" "Yes, sir." "You are going to wear yourself out." "I'm fine." His hand brushed the small of her back as he reached past her for nothing at all. Nora went still. He chuckled softly. "So tense. You should learn to relax." She stepped sideways, putting the sink between them. "I have dishes." His smile thinned. "That mouth of yours is why you never get ahead." Nora looked down at the gray water. Maybe he was right. Maybe if she smiled sweeter, laughed softer, let men take whatever little pieces of her they wanted, life would punish her less. But some parts of yourself had to be guarded even when you had nothing else. By 3 in the afternoon, her shift ended. She left through the back door with sore hands and grease in her hair, then took 2 buses to Daisy's diner. Daisy's sat near a busy street where the neon sign flickered even in daylight. Half the letters worked. The coffee was bad. The pie was usually stale. Truckers, nurses, students, lonely old men, drunk office workers, and people with nowhere else to go all ended up there sooner or later. Nora liked the night regulars best. They were tired in an honest way. She clocked in at 4. Her manager, Rick, barely looked up from his phone. "You're late." Nora checked the clock. "I'm 3 minutes early." Rick leaned back in his chair. Attitude already going to be a long night. Every night was a long night with Rick. He was 38, divorced and bitter about both facts. He liked power in small ugly doses. He changed schedules without warning. He deducted meals from paychecks when customers walked out. He called women honey when he wanted something and ungrateful when they said no. Nora tied her apron and started her shift. The dinner rush hit fast. Coffee, burgers, fries, pancakes, refills, complaints. A child dropped a milkshake under table 6. A man at the counter snapped his fingers every time his cup got half empty. A woman sent back eggs twice because the yolks were too emotional, whatever that meant. Nora smiled through all of it. At 9, a group of men came in drunk from a bar down the street. They were loud, red-faced, and full of the kind of confidence that made women measure the distance to the nearest exit. One of them kept calling Nora baby. She ignored it. He grabbed her wrist when she set down his plate. "Come on, baby, smile for me." Nora pulled her hand back. "Please don't touch me." The table went quiet. Then they laughed. Rick saw everything from the register. He did nothing. The man spilled coffee on purpose before leaving. Hot, brown liquid splashed across the table and onto Nora's apron. He tossed a few coins beside the cup. "For the attitude," he said. After they left, Rick walked over and looked at the mess. "You need to be friendlier." Nora stared at him. "He grabbed me." Rick shrugged. "He paid." "No, he didn't. He walked out on half the bill." Rick's eyes hardened. "Then it comes out of your tips." Nora wanted to scream. She wanted to take the coffee pot and throw it against the wall. She wanted to ask how many times a person could be punished for surviving before something inside them finally stopped getting back up. Instead, she wiped the table. By 11:30, the diner had gone quiet. Rain tapped against the front windows. The neon sign outside painted the booths in red and blue. Nora's feet throbbed so badly that each step felt like walking on glass. Rick called her into the back office just before she clocked out. He did not ask her to sit. "Your shifts are changing next week." Nora's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "I'm cutting you down to 4 nights." "Rick, I need 6. Business is slow." "It's not slow." His mouth twisted. "Then maybe I just need people who understand teamwork." There it was, the real reason. Nora remembered last Friday when Rick had cornered her near the storage shelves and asked why she kept acting like she was too good for him. She remembered his hand on the doorframe blocking her way. She remembered slipping past him with her pulse hammering in her throat. Now he was smiling. Nora felt something cold settle inside her. "You can't do this." "I already did." "I won't make rent." "Not my problem." She looked at the framed employee policy on the wall. Respect. Safety. Integrity. The words were printed in cheerful blue letters. For a moment, she almost laughed again. Instead, she took her coat from the hook. Rick watched her. "You know, Nora, life gets easier when you stop making everything so hard." She turned at the door. "No, Rick. Life gets easier for men like you when women like me stop saying no." His face flushed. She left before he could answer. Outside, the November air cut straight through her thin coat. The rain had slowed to a mist, but the sidewalks shone black under the streetlights. Nora pulled her collar up and started toward the bus stop. The last bus came at midnight if the driver felt generous. If she missed it, she would have to walk home. 2 hours through streets where men slowed their cars beside women walking alone. 2 hours past liquor stores, locked churches, and alleys that smelled of old beer and worse. 2 hours with cardboard in her shoes and $8 in the bank. She walked faster. Across the city, beyond the river and the towers and the neighborhoods, Nora only saw through bus windows. Willa Callahan pressed her small hand against the glass of her bedroom window and watched the rain slide down the world. The Callahan estate sat near Lake Forest, hidden behind stone walls, iron gates, cameras, guards, and trees trimmed so perfectly they looked unreal. To anyone outside, it was a palace. To Willa, it was a beautiful box. Her room was warm. Her bed was soft. Her shelves were filled with books, dolls, music boxes, puzzles, and paints. She had a closet full of dresses and shoes she had never worn outside the property. She had tutors, nurses, housekeepers, guards, and a father who would burn Chicago to ash before letting harm reach her. But she did not have friends, not real ones. She had never sat in a classroom with other children, never traded lunches, never waited in line for a school bus, never been invited to a birthday party in a noisy arcade with cheap pizza and paper cups of soda, never walked down a street without men speaking into hidden microphones. Her father called it protection. Willa tried to believe him. Most days she did. Mason Callahan loved her. She knew that the way she knew her own name. He read to her when business kept him out until midnight. He learned how to braid her hair badly and pretended not to care when she laughed at him. He kept every painting she gave him, even the ugly ones from when she was 5 and thought horses had 6 legs. But love could still feel like a locked door. That evening, Willa sat cross-legged on her rug while her nanny brushed her hair. The television in the corner showed a commercial for the downtown holiday lights. Children in bright coats ran beneath glowing arches. A vendor poured hot chocolate into paper cups. A little boy pressed his face to a bakery window. People laughed with their heads tilted back as if the cold itself was part of the fun. Willa leaned closer. "Can I go there?" Her nanny, Miss Greer, did not look at the screen. "No, sweetheart." "Why?" "Your father says crowds are not safe." "Can we go when there are no crowds?" "Then there would be nothing to see." Willa frowned. "I want to see it anyway." Miss Greer sighed not unkindly. "You have lights in the garden." "They don't look like those." A guard, standing near the door, gave a soft laugh. "Little princess wants the real world." Willa turned toward him. The guard straightened as if he had not meant to be heard. Miss Greer shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. "Little princess." The words stayed with Willa after dinner. They stayed with her while Dr. Pierce listened to her heart and told her she needed more rest. They stayed with her when her father came in wearing a black suit and the tired eyes he tried to hide from her. Mason sat beside her bed and opened the book they were reading together. "You're quiet tonight, Bird." Willa looked at his scarred knuckles. "Daddy." "Yes. Is the real world very scary?" Mason did not answer right away. Outside her bedroom, guards moved like shadows. "It can be," he said. "Is it always scary?" His face softened. "No, not always." "Then why can't I see the not scary parts?" Mason looked down at the book. "Because men hated him. Because his blood had bought their walls. Because she was his only weakness, and every enemy he had knew it. Because her heart was fragile, and the world was not gentle. Because he had already buried her mother and would not survive burying her too." Instead, he touched her cheek. "One day." Willa hated those words. One day was a room where grown-ups put promises they did not want to keep. After Mason left, Willa waited. She waited until Miss Greer checked on her and closed the door. She waited until the hallway voices faded. She waited until the house settled into its deep, guarded silence. Then she got out of bed. Her heart beat faster, not from illness at first, but from fear and excitement. She put on her white coat, the one with pearl buttons. She slipped her mother's small music box into one pocket and her phone into the other. On her wrist, the silver bracelet with the black raven felt cool against her skin. She knew the laundry carts were taken down the service hall at night. She knew because she watched everything. Children in cages learned to study locks. Willa moved quietly through the corridor. Twice, she hid behind curtains as guards passed. Once, she almost turned back when her chest tightened. But then she remembered the commercial, the lights, the children laughing under the glowing arches. Just 1 hour. She only wanted 1 hour. At the service entrance, a laundry truck waited with its rear doors open. Workers moved bags from the house to the truck, talking about the rain, the cold, a basketball game on Sunday. No one looked down. No one expected the little princess to crawl behind a stack of linen bags and curl herself into the dark. The doors slammed shut. The truck started moving. For the first time in her life, Willa left the estate without permission. At first it felt like flying. Then the road got rough. The air inside the truck smelled like detergent and metal. Willa held her stuffed rabbit against her chest and tried not to cough. She thought about calling her father, but if she called too soon, he would bring her home before she saw anything. She just wanted to see lights. She just wanted to know what ordinary children felt when they stood under them. When the truck finally stopped, Willa pushed the door open enough to slip out. She was not downtown. She did not know that. The street was wet, loud, and strange. Neon signs flickered. A bus hissed at the curb. Men smoked outside a liquor store. Somewhere, music thumped behind a brick wall. The air smelled like rain gasoline, fried food, and something sour. Willa stepped onto the sidewalk. No one knew her. No one watched her. For one shining moment, she smiled. Then her chest hurt. It started as pressure beneath her ribs. She stopped walking and pressed a hand to her coat. The pressure sharpened. Her breath became thin. The lights around her stretched and blurred. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers shook. She tried to call Daddy, but someone bumped into her shoulder as they passed. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the pavement. The screen cracked across the glass like black lightning. Willa bent to pick it up, and the world tilted. She stumbled toward the alley because it was quieter there. The cold pavement rose toward her. Her knees hit first, then her hands, then her cheek. The music box in her pocket began to play soft and broken. A tiny melody in a dirty alley. Willa tried to say Daddy, but only a breath came out. Not far away, Nora Bennett turned the corner toward the bus stop with half a biscuit in her coat pocket, and rain soaking through her shoes. She saw the bus shelter ahead. Empty. Good. If the bus was late, she might still make it. Then she heard something. Small. Not a scream. Not a cry exactly. More like a wounded breath. Nora stopped. The alley beside the laundromat was dark except for a weak yellow light buzzing over a back door. Trash bags slumped against the wall. Water dripped from a rusted fire escape. The smell made her stomach turn. Her body knew what to do. Keep walking. Women like Nora survived by not being curious. They did not investigate sounds in alleys. They did not get involved. They did not risk their lives for trouble that was not theirs. She took one step forward. The sound came again. A child. Nora closed her eyes. "Damn it," she whispered. Then she turned back. At first, she saw only the white coat. Then the hair-pale blonde against the filthy pavement. Then the small hand curled near a cracked phone. Nora ran. She dropped to her knees beside the girl, ignoring the dirty water soaking through her pants. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The child's lashes fluttered. Her lips were blue. Nora pressed 2 fingers against her neck and felt a pulse weak and uneven. Fear shot through her so hard she nearly dropped the phone. No, stay with me." She looked around the alley. No one. Of course, no one. The girl opened her eyes. They were gray, bright, and strange like storm clouds lit by moonlight. "Daddy," she whispered. "I'll call him," Nora said. "I'll call somebody." She grabbed the cracked phone. The screen still worked barely. There was no password access, but the emergency contact glowed on the damaged display. Daddy. Below the name was 1 number. Then Nora saw the bracelet. Silver. Heavy. Expensive. A black raven with spread wings engraved into the metal. Her breath stopped. Everyone in Chicago knew that mark. The Callahan family. Mason Callahan. The man people mentioned only in low voices. The man cops pretended not to see. The man whose enemies vanished into Rivers' warehouses and rumors. The man who owned half the city and haunted the rest. Nora stared at the child. Not a princess, not a symbol. A little girl freezing on the ground trying to breathe. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Every survival instinct she had screamed at her to put the phone down and walk away. Then the girl's cold fingers caught her sleeve. "Daddy," she breathed again, "please." Nora looked toward the street where the last bus sighed at the curb doors open, waiting. A way home. A way out. Then she looked back at the little girl. Nora slipped off her thin coat and wrapped it around the child's shaking body. "Okay," she whispered, pressing the call button. "Okay, sweetheart, I'm here." The line rang once. Twice. Then a man answered, his voice low-controlled and colder than the rain. "You have 10 seconds to explain why you have this number." Nora's throat closed around the first word. The voice on the line did not sound surprised. It did not sound sleepy. It sounded like a locked room, cold and dark, and built to hold dangerous things. She looked down at the little girl in her lap. Rain collected on the child's pale lashes. Her small chest rose in shallow, uneven pulls beneath Nora's coat. "Please don't hang up," Nora said, and hated how badly her voice shook. "I found a little girl in an alley. She's sick. I think she's unconscious." Silence. Then the man spoke again, softer this time, which somehow made him more frightening. "What little girl?" Nora swallowed. Blonde hair. Gray eyes. White coat. She has a silver bracelet with a black raven on it. The line went so quiet Nora thought the call had dropped. Then something crashed on the other end. A chair, maybe. Where is she? The command hit like a gunshot. I don't know the address. I'm near the laundromat by Halstead and Archer, behind Daisy's diner by the bus stop. She keeps asking for her daddy. Is she breathing? Nora pressed 2 fingers to the girl's neck again. The pulse fluttered beneath her skin, faint as a trapped moth. Barely. The man's breath changed. Just once. One sharp break in all that control. Listen to me carefully, he said. You keep her warm. You keep her head raised. You do not let her sleep if you can help it. I'm trying. What is your name? Nora looked toward the mouth of the alley. Empty street. Wet pavement. The bus had already pulled away, red taillights fading into the rain. Nora. Nora what? She hesitated. Every instinct told her not to give this man anything more than she already had. The little girl stirred. Daddy, she whispered. Nora closed her eyes. Nora Bennett. Nora Bennett, the man repeated, as if carving her name into stone. My name is Mason Callahan. I am coming for my daughter. If she dies before I arrive, there is no place in this city you can hide. Fear turned Nora's fingers numb. Then anger sparked through it. She's wrapped in my coat, Nora said, her voice suddenly steadier. I'm freezing on the ground with her because I didn't leave her in the rain. So don't threaten me. Just get here. Another silence. This one felt different. Then Mason said, stay with her. I already told you I am. The call ended. Nora stared at the cracked screen, heart beating so hard it hurt. Mason Callahan knew her name now. He knew her voice. He knew where she was. She had done the one thing people in Chicago learned never to do. She had invited the devil to find her. The little girl shifted, face tightening in pain. Nora pushed everything else away. Hey, she whispered, bending close. Stay with me, sweetheart. Your daddy's coming. The child's eyes opened a little. Are you scared of him? Nora almost laughed. Yes, everybody is. That's so. The girl gave the smallest nod. But he makes pancakes. Nora blinked, caught off guard by the softness of it. Does he? Bad ones. A weak smile touched the child's mouth, then vanished as another shiver ran through her. Nora rubbed her hands along the child's arms through the coat. What's your name, honey? Willa. Willa, Nora repeated. That's pretty. Mommy picked it. Nora's chest tightened. Then your mommy had good taste. Willa looked up at her with those strange gray eyes. Do you have a mommy? The question was so innocent that it found the oldest wound without trying. I did, Nora said. Where is she? Nora looked at the rain falling through the alley light. Somewhere I can't call. Willa seemed to understand in the way children sometimes understood sorrow better than adults. My mommy is there too. Nora brushed damp hair away from the girl's forehead. Then maybe they know each other. Willa's breathing hitched. I'm cold. I know, sweetheart. Nora pulled the coat tighter around her. The rain soaked through Nora's uniform and chilled her skin until she could barely feel her arms. Her knees hurt from the pavement. Her stomach cramped with hunger. A bus hissed somewhere far down the street, gone without her. Then the city changed. At first, it was only a low vibration beneath the ground. Nora lifted her head. Engines. Not one. Several. Fast. The sound came closer, roaring through the streets with the force of something that did not ask permission. Headlights swung across the brick walls. Tires hissed through puddles. A car horn blared and cut off sharply. Willa's eyes opened. Daddy. 3 black SUVs turned into the alley like a storm made of steel. The first one stopped so close, Nora flinched. Doors opened before the engines died. Men in dark suits stepped out with hands near their jackets, faces, hard eyes moving everywhere at once. They looked at rooftops, windows, fire escapes, shadows. Not one of them looked surprised. They moved like violence had trained them from birth. Nora tightened her arms around Willa. A tall man, with close-cropped hair and a scar along his jaw, approached first. His gaze fell on the child, then on Nora. Move your hands slow, he said. Nora's mouth went dry. I'm not hurting her. I know, move slow anyway. Then the rear door of the middle SUV opened. Mason Callahan stepped into the rain. Nora had heard stories about him. Everyone had. The stories made him sound larger than life, a myth in an expensive suit. But standing there in the alley, he was worse because he was real. Tall, broad, dressed in black from coat to shoes. Dark hair damp from the rain. A scar cut through one eyebrow and disappeared near his temple. His face was controlled, carved from hard lines and old decisions. But his eyes were what made Nora forget to breathe. Steel gray. Willa's eyes only colder. Those eyes moved over Nora once sharp enough to wound, then dropped to the child in her lap. Everything in him broke. It happened fast, but Nora saw it. The ruler vanished. The legend cracked open. The man dropped to his knees in the filthy water as if the ground beneath him did not exist. Willa. His voice was raw. Willa turned her head weakly. Daddy. Mason reached for her, then stopped, his hands hovering for one terrified second, as if touching her wrong might shatter her. I'm here, little bird. Nora helped shift Willa into his arms. The moment Mason held her, he pressed his cheek to her wet hair and closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Willa whispered. I just wanted to see the lights. No, Mason said. His voice broke on the word. No apologies. Not from you, never from you. The tall man with the scar stepped closer. Boss Dr. Pierce is ready. Mason rose with Willa held against his chest. His eyes found Nora again. She expected anger, suspicion, a question backed by threats. Instead, his gaze stopped on her bare arms, on the way she shook from cold, on the coat wrapped around his daughter. You took off your coat for her. Nora hugged herself. She was freezing. Mason looked at her for another long second. Then he turned to the scarred man. Eli, bring her. Nora's pulse jumped. No, I called you. She's with you now. I should go. Mason did not raise his voice. That made it worse. You are coming with us. I have work in the morning. One of the men almost laughed, then stopped when Mason glanced at him. Mason stepped closer, Willa still in his arms. My daughter was found dying in an alley by a woman I don't know. After escaping a house no one is supposed to escape. Until I understand every piece of that, you are not walking back into the dark. Nora lifted her chin. I didn't do anything wrong. No, Mason said. You did something rare. The words unsettled her more than a threat would have. Eli opened the SUV door. Nora looked at the leather seats inside, then at the alley behind her. There was no bus now, no witness, no safe choice. She climbed in. The door closed with a heavy sound that felt final. The convoy pulled away so fast, Nora's shoulder hit the seat. She sat between Eli and another silent man, both of them still as stone. In front, Mason held Willa across his lap while speaking quietly to someone on the phone. Have Pierce prepare oxygen, cardiac monitoring, and fever control. I want every camera from the service entrance pulled. No one leaves the estate. No one sleeps until I know how this happened. He listened. His jaw tightened. No, not now. My daughter first. Nora stared at the back of his head. That was the thing no one had told her about monsters. Sometimes they loved. Sometimes they loved so fiercely it made them more terrifying. Chicago blurred past the window. Red lights became smears on wet glass. Cars moved out of the way before the SUVs reached them. At one intersection, a police cruiser sat beneath a street lamp. Nora saw the officer look directly at them, then look down at his dashboard. She understood then. Mason Callahan did not hide from the city. The city lowered its eyes. Willa made a small sound. Mason bent over her. I'm here. I've got you. Don't be mad. I'm not mad at you. At anyone. A muscle worked in his cheek. Sleep, little bird. Don't hurt Mr. Paul. He didn't see me. Mason's eyes closed. Even half-conscious, the child was trying to save someone else from her father's wrath. Nora looked away because the tenderness of it hurt. The ride took less than 20 minutes. The city thinned, then changed. Brick shops and wet alleys gave way to quiet roads, black trees, and wide houses hidden behind gates. Finally, the convoy turned onto a long private drive. The gates ahead were iron, taller than any Nora had seen up close. A black raven spread its wings at the center where the two halves met. Cameras moved silently above the stone pillars. Guards stepped from a booth, recognized the vehicles, and opened the way. The estate rose at the end of the drive like something from another century. White stone, tall windows, wide steps, a fountain in the courtyard where rain disturbed the dark water. Light poured from the entrance, warm and golden, but nothing about the place felt welcoming. It was too guarded, too quiet, too perfect. A palace with a pulse of danger beneath the marble. The SUVs stopped. The front doors opened before Mason stepped out. A medical team rushed down the steps with a stretcher. At their center was an older man in a navy sweater beneath his white coat. Silver hair swept back, face lined by years of difficult nights. "Mason," he said. Pierce Mason answered, and there was desperation under the control now. Dr. Raymond Pierce reached for Willa. Mason did not let go. For a moment, the doctor did not move. He only looked at him with the calm of someone who had known him long before the rest of the world learned to fear him. Dr. Pierce said quietly, "Give her to me." Mason looked down at Willa's face. Then he placed his daughter on the stretcher as if laying down his own heart. The team moved fast. Oxygen mask, blanket, monitor, hands working with practiced urgency. Willa's fingers slipped from Mason's sleeve. He followed one step, then another, until Dr. Pierce turned. "You wait here." "No, you will wait here because if you come in like this, you'll make my staff afraid to breathe." Mason's eyes flashed. Dr. Pierce did not flinch. Nora watched stunned. At last, Mason stepped back. The medical team disappeared through the doors. The instant Willa was gone, the entrance hall became painfully still. Mason stood empty-handed, rain dripping from his coat onto the marble floor. No one spoke. No one dared. Then Eli turned to Nora. "This way." She followed because her legs seemed to understand before her mind did. Inside the house was warmer than any place Nora had been in years. Heat wrapped around her frozen skin. Chandeliers glittered above. The marble floor reflected every light. Paintings lined the walls, faces of dead men and beautiful women watching from gold frames. Nora looked down at herself. Wet uniform, dirty knees, hair falling from its knot, torn shoes leaving faint marks on the polished floor. She wanted to disappear. A woman in her 60s approached with a folded blanket and a pair of dry socks. She wore a black dress and moved with quiet authority. "I'm Mrs. Bell," she said gently. "Come sit, dear." Dear. The word nearly undid Nora. Mrs. Bell led her into a sitting room with a fireplace burning low red velvet chairs and shelves filled with old books. She placed tea on the table beside Nora, then draped the blanket around her shoulders. Nora clutched it with both hands. "Thank you." Mrs. Bell studied her face. "You found Miss Willa." Nora nodded. Mrs. Bell's eyes softened with something like grief. "Then drink while it's hot." She left without asking questions. Nora sat alone listening. Footsteps moved in the hall. Low voices. A phone ringing. Doors opening and closing. Somewhere farther away, Mason's voice cut through the house calm now, which meant danger had found its leash again. "I want every guard on duty questioned separately. Start with the service wing. Pull traffic feeds from the last hour. Find the laundry truck. Find the driver. Find out if anyone helped her." A pause. "No one touches him until I say." Nora stared into the fireplace. She had entered a world where a 7-year-old girl had a private medical wing, where guards could vanish behind orders, where one man's grief could turn into a citywide hunt. On the wall above the mantel hung a portrait. A woman with blonde hair stood in a garden, one hand resting gently over the swell of pregnancy beneath her pale dress. Her eyes were soft gray, almost silver. Willa's eyes before fear and sickness dimmed them. Nora stood without thinking and moved closer. The woman looked young. Kind. Not weak, but luminous in the way some people seem to carry mourning inside them. A small brass plate beneath the frame read Evelyn Callahan. Nora whispered, "Your daughter is beautiful." Behind her, a voice answered, "She looks like her mother." Nora turned. Mason stood in the doorway without his coat, now sleeves rolled to his forearms, hair damp and disordered. He looked less like a king in that moment, and more like a man who had spent years refusing to collapse. Nora stepped back from the portrait. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stare." Everyone stares at Evelyn. His voice had changed, still deep, still dangerous, but tired now. Nora looked toward the hall. "How is Willa?" "Pierce is stabilizing her. Her heart rhythm is irregular. Her temperature dropped too low from the rain." Nora's hand tightened around the blanket. "I tried to keep her warm." "I know." 2 words, heavy ones. Mason entered the room and stopped near the chair across from her. "You knew who she was." It was not a question. "Yes?" "You saw the raven." "Yes." "You knew calling me could be dangerous." Nora looked at the fire. "I figured. And you still called." She was a child. You would be surprised how many people forget that when fear is involved. Nora met his eyes. "I was afraid." "I heard that." But she was more afraid. For a moment, Mason said nothing. Then he sat across from her. The room seemed to shrink around him. "Tell me exactly what happened." So she did. She told him about leaving Daisy's after her shift, about the bus stop, about the sound in the alley, about finding Willa cold on the ground with the phone near her hand. She told him the child had asked for her father, had worried he might be mad, had said her mother told her angels came when people were scared. Mason's face did not move at the word mother, but Nora saw his hand tighten on the arm of the chair. When she finished, Mason looked toward the portrait. She wanted to see the lights. Nora remembered Willa's whisper. Yes, she has never seen them without a window between her and the world. There was no excuse in his voice, only pain. Nora surprised herself by saying, "That must be lonely." Mason looked back at her. She is alive because she is protected. She ran because she felt trapped. The room went cold. Eli appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the shift in air. Nora realized what she had said and to whom she had said it, but she did not take it back. Mason's eyes stayed on her for a long time. Then instead of anger, something like exhaustion crossed his face. Both things can be true. Nora looked down. Yes. Before either of them could speak again, Dr. Pierce entered. Mason stood instantly. Nora stood too, though no one had asked her to. The doctor's face was tired but not grim. "She's stable." Mason's shoulders dropped half an inch. To anyone else, it might have been nothing. To Nora, it looked like a mountain letting go of the sky. "She's sleeping," Dr. Pierce continued. "We've warmed her, corrected the rhythm for now, and started fluids." "But Mason, this can't continue." Mason's expression hardened, bracing. "Say it." "The valve is worsening faster than we hoped. The surgery cannot wait 6 months. How long? 2 months if she remains stable. Less if there is another episode." Mason stared at him. Nora could almost see the war inside him. Rage looking for a target. Fear looking for a prayer. "Find the surgeon," Mason said. "I already contacted Dr. Helen Ward in Boston. Bring her here. She may insist on a hospital setting, then I buy the floor." Dr. Pierce sighed. "Mason." "My daughter lives," Mason said. The doctor held his gaze. "Yes," he said quietly. "That is the plan." After Pierce left, Mason remained standing, eyes fixed on nothing. Nora should have stayed silent. Instead, she asked, "Can I see her?" Mason turned slowly. The request seemed to surprise him. "She asked for you before the sedative took her under." Nora's chest tightened. "She did. She called you the angel from the alley." Nora looked away. "I'm not an angel." "No," Mason said. "Angels don't usually talk back to me." A laugh slipped out before she could stop it. It was small, shaky, and badly timed. But Mason's mouth almost softened. Almost. He led her down a long hall to a bedroom near the medical wing. Willa lay in the center of a large bed, small beneath white blankets, an oxygen tube beneath her nose monitors glowing beside her. Her hair had been cleaned and brushed. Without the alley's dirt and rain, she looked even younger. Nora stopped at the door. Mason moved to the bedside and touched Willa's hair with a gentleness that did not belong to the stories people told about him. "She doesn't trust easily," he said. Nora stepped closer. "Children know when adults are lying." Mason glanced at her. "Do they?" "Usually." "Then she must have known you meant it when you said you'd stay." Nora looked at Willa's sleeping face. "I meant until you came." Willa stirred as if the words reached her through sleep. Her small hand moved on the blanket. Nora reached for it before thinking. Willa's fingers closed around hers. Mason watched the movement. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. Not suspicion, not gratitude. Need maybe. And that frightened Nora more than his threats. Later, Mrs. Bell brought Nora to another room to change into dry clothes. The sweater and pants waiting on the bed were simple, soft, and exactly her size. That unsettled her. When she returned to the sitting room, Mason was there with Eli. Eli held a folder. Nora stopped. Mason looked at her. "Sit, Nora. I'd rather stand." "Then stand." Eli opened the folder, but Mason took it from him and set it on the table. "I had you looked into." Her face went hot. "You what?" "My daughter's life touched yours. I needed to know who you were. You could have asked. You could have lied." Nora gave a bitter smile. "People like me don't get privacy, do we?" For once, Mason did not answer immediately. Then he said, "Not from men like me." The honesty struck harder than a defense. He continued, "Orphaned at 13. Foster care until 18. 2 jobs. 1 eviction notice. Medical debt from a stabbing at Daisy's. Loan fraud tied to a man named Tyler Reed. No insurance. No family listed. $8.62 in your account this morning." Nora felt each fact like a hand opening a drawer inside her chest. "Stop." Mason did. The quiet that followed was worse. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. "Is this the part where you tell me I'm desperate enough to be useful?" Eli's gaze shifted to Mason. Mason's face remained still. "No," he said. "This is the part where I tell you desperate people usually take care of themselves first. You didn't." Nora could not speak. Mason stepped closer, but not too close. "My daughter needs more than guards. Guards watch doors. Doctors watch her heart. Tutors watch her lessons. None of them saw that she was lonely enough to climb into a laundry truck." His voice lowered. "You saw her as a child before you saw my name." Nora whispered, "Anyone should have, but you did." The fire cracked behind them. Mason said, "I want you to stay." Nora looked up sharply. "Number." "You haven't heard the offer." "I heard enough." $12,000 a month. A room beside Willa's. Medical care. Debts cleared. Protection from anyone who thinks your past gives them a claim on you. Her heart began pounding for a different reason now. The number was absurd. Impossible. A door appearing where there had only ever been walls. But the man offering it stood in a house guarded by men with guns. "What am I supposed to be?" she asked. "Her companion. Her guardian in the ways my people are not. You stay near her. You tell me when she is afraid. You tell me when my protection becomes another prison. You learn the emergency protocols. You keep her safe until my men can reach her. I'm a waitress. You were a waitress tonight. Tonight, you were also the only person in Chicago who stopped." Nora looked toward the hallway that led to Willa's room. Her old life waited outside these gates. The cold apartment. The final notice. Rick's smile. The debt calls. The lump she had not let herself think about in 3 days. The bus rides. The hunger. The quiet terror of becoming a body no one found until the rent was overdue. Then she looked at Mason. And the price. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You live under my roof. You follow security rules. You do not speak of what you see here. You do not lie to me about my daughter. Ever. That's all." "No," he said. "You accept that once you matter to Willa, you become visible to my enemies." The truth of it settled between them. A beautiful cage, Nora thought. But somewhere down the hall, a little girl slept with Nora's hand still remembered in hers. "I need time," Nora said. Mason nodded once. "Until morning." He turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused. "Nora." She looked at him. Whatever you decide, my daughter breathes tonight because of you." Then he was gone. Nora sat alone by the dying fire until the house became quiet. At some point, exhaustion pulled at her bones, but sleep would not come. Her life had been split open in a single night, and every path ahead looked impossible. A soft knock came at the door. Nora stood. When she opened it, Willa stood in the hallway in pale pajamas, one hand holding a stuffed rabbit, the other pressed lightly to her chest. Mrs. Bell hovered behind her, worried and helpless. "I woke up," Willa whispered. Nora dropped to her knees. "You should be in bed." "I know." "Are you hurting?" "A little." "Then we need to get you back." Willa's gray eyes filled. "If I go back, will you leave?" The question pierced clean through Nora. She saw herself at 13, sitting on a stranger's couch with a trash bag of clothes at her feet, waiting for someone to promise they would stay, and knowing no one would. Nora reached out and took Willa's small hand. "I'm here right now." Willa stepped closer. "Daddy scares people away." "He does, but you yelled at him on the phone." "I was scared. Angels can be scared." Nora smiled, but her eyes stung. "I think they usually are." Willa studied her with solemn certainty. "Mommy said angels come when someone needs them. I needed you, so you came." Nora could have corrected her. She could have said she was just a tired waitress who missed her bus. She could have said angels did not have overdue rent, scarred, skin-cracked hands and fear living in their stomach. Instead, she pulled the blanket from the sofa and wrapped it around Willa's shoulders. "Come sit with me until you're sleepy." Willa climbed beside her, curling into Nora's side as if she had always belonged there. From the dark end of the hallway, Mason stood unseen, one hand resting against the wall. Nora did not notice him. Willa did. She looked past Nora and smiled faintly. "Daddy," she whispered. "My angel stayed." Mason did not move. Nora turned and their eyes met across the quiet room. For the first time, the most feared man in Chicago looked almost afraid to hope. Nora held Willa closer. "I'll stay tonight," she said. Willa closed her eyes. Mason's voice came low from the doorway. "Tonight is enough." But the way Willa's fingers clung to Nora's sweater made the word feel much larger than that. Tonight was enough. That was what Mason had said from the doorway. But morning came soft and gold through the tall windows, and Willa was still asleep with her hand curled around the edge of Nora's sweater. Nora woke sitting upright on the velvet sofa, her neck stiff, her legs numb, and a child tucked against her side like she had fallen asleep in the safest place on earth. For a few seconds, Nora did not move. She only listened. No sirens, no pipes knocking in a freezing apartment, no neighbors shouting through thin walls. Only the quiet crackle of the fireplace, the faint ticking of an antique clock, and Willa's steady breathing. It felt impossible. Then Willa stirred. Her gray eyes opened slowly, clearer than they had been in the alley, though still shadowed by exhaustion. "You stayed," she whispered. Nora brushed a strand of blonde hair from her cheek. "I said I would. People say that." "I know." Willa studied her face with a seriousness too heavy for 7 years old. "But you did." Nora's throat tightened. Before she could answer, Mrs. Bell entered with a tray. Warm tea for Nora. Toast cut into triangles for Willa. A small bowl of strawberries arranged like someone had cared about the color. Behind Mrs. Bell stood a nurse, quiet and professional, ready to take Willa back to her room for medicine and rest. Willa's fingers tightened. "No." Nora felt the panic before the child spoke it. "I'm not leaving." Nora said gently, "I'll walk with you." That was enough. Willa let the nurse check her pulse, but only while holding Nora's hand. By noon, Mason had his answer. Nora found him waiting in a long sunlit corridor outside Willa's bedroom. He wore a dark suit again, perfect and severe, but there were faint shadows beneath his eyes. He looked like a man who had not slept and had no intention of admitting it. "She wants you near her," he said. Nora glanced toward the half-open door. Willa was inside painting from bed with a tray across her lap. "I know. And you." Nora looked down at the new shoes Mrs. Bell had quietly placed beside the sofa while she slept. Soft leather, warm lining, no cardboard. She thought of her apartment, the final notice, the cold coffee, Rick's office, Tyler's lies, the cracked window above her mattress. She thought of the alley Willa's blue lips and Mason's hands trembling when he touched his daughter's face. Then she met his eyes. "I'll stay." Mason did not smile. The man did not seem built for simple expressions, but something in his face eased. Terms remain as stated. "I'm not staying because of the money." "I know." The speed of his answer startled her. He stepped closer, keeping just enough distance not to crowd her. "But the money still stands. So does the medical care. So does the protection." Nora almost argued out of habit. Pride rose first, sharp and useless. Then she thought of Mrs. Alvarez saying pride did not keep you warm. "All right," she said. Mason nodded once. "Your room is beside Willa's. Mrs. Bell has prepared it. Eli will begin training you tomorrow morning." "Training. You need to know what to do if this house becomes unsafe." Nora looked around the marble corridor, the cameras hidden in corners, the guards standing like statues at the far end. "This house looks safer than a bank vault." Mason's gaze turned cold. Vaults are built because thieves exist. That was the first lesson. Safety in Mason Callahan's world was not peace. It was preparation. Her room was larger than her entire apartment. For several minutes after Mrs. Bell left her there, Nora stood just inside the door, afraid to touch anything. Sunlight spilled across polished wood floors. Heavy curtains framed windows overlooking the garden. A bed with white sheets stood against one wall. A wardrobe waited open with clothes in soft colors, simple cuts, all her size. Nora walked to the closet and touched a cream sweater. Cashmere, maybe. She was not sure. She only knew it felt like something made for a life that had never belonged to her. On the small writing desk sat a phone, a house key card, and a folded note in Mrs. Bell's neat handwriting. "Miss Willa's room connects through the inner door. She may come to you if she feels frightened. The door opens from her side only." Nora looked at the connecting door. White, quiet, ordinary. But nothing in this house was ordinary. That evening, Willa insisted Nora join dinner. The dining room was long enough to make Nora feel like she had entered a museum after closing. A chandelier hung above the table. Silverware lined the plates with military precision. Mason sat at one end, Willa at his right, and Nora beside Willa because the child demanded it with the kind of confidence only loved children possessed. Eli stood near the wall, arms folded, face unreadable. Willa ate 2 bites of chicken, then pushed peas around her plate. "Daddy," she said. "Yes, Bird. Nora should sit with us every night." Mason looked at Nora. Nora looked at her water glass. "She can," Mason said. Willa smiled. "And breakfast, if she wants. And lunch." Mason's mouth twitched. "She may need time away from us, Willa." Willa looked horrified. "Why?" Nora leaned closer. "Because even angels need to brush their teeth." Willa considered that seriously. "All right, but she comes back after." Mason watched them, and Nora felt his attention like warmth from a fire she was not sure she should stand near. After dinner, he showed Nora the estate. Not the pretty parts first, the dangerous ones. He led her past hidden cameras, reinforced doors, coded locks, medical stations, guard posts, escape routes, and rooms she was not allowed to enter. Eli followed behind them, silent as a shadow. They stopped outside a section of wall near Willa's bedroom. Mason pressed his thumb to a panel Nora had not noticed. The wall slid open. Cold air breathed out. Inside was a safe room. Concrete walls. Steel door. Shelves stocked with water blankets, medicine, canned food, batteries. A narrow bed. A radio system. A red emergency button covered by clear plastic. In one locked cabinet, Nora glimpsed weapons before Mason stepped in front of it. Her stomach tightened. "This is for Willa." "Yes. She's 7. His eyes did not soften. "She is my daughter." The words carried everything. Love, fear, blood, history. Mason pointed to the red button. "If there is an alarm at night, you bring Willa here. You do not look for me. You do not ask questions. You do not wait for anyone. You get her inside and press this. What happens when I press it? Every guard on the property converges here. Eli receives an alert. So do I. And if someone gets inside before the door closes. Eli answered from behind her. Then you keep Willa behind you and buy 10 seconds. Nora turned to him. 10 seconds. In this house, 10 seconds can change everything. Nora looked at the red button until her reflection blurred on its plastic cover. The next morning, training began. Eli met her in the basement at 6. Nora arrived in borrowed workout clothes with her hair tied back and sleep still clinging to her eyes. The training room smelled faintly of rubber mats, metal, and old sweat. One wall held targets. Another held mirrors. A long table displayed emergency radios, flashlights, zip ties, medical kits, and a handgun. Nora stopped when she saw it. Eli noticed. You ever held one? Number. Good, less bad habits. I don't want to shoot anyone. I don't want to get shot. We all make compromises. She looked at him. Does everything with you sound like a threat? Only when I'm being friendly. Against her will, Nora almost smiled. He taught her how to stand first, how to plant her feet, how to breathe, how to hold the gun without letting fear make her wrists weak. When she finally lifted it toward the target, her hands shook so badly the barrel dipped. Eli did not mock her. He only said again. The first shot made her flinch hard enough to step backward. The sound cracked through the room and through memory. A diner floor slick with blood. A masked man shouting. The flash of a knife. Her own voice choking on air. Nora lowered the gun, breathing fast. Eli watched her carefully. That scar on your side, he said. Robbery. She nodded once. Knife. Another nod. Then you already know what happens when violence reaches you before help does. Nora's eyes burned. I know what it feels like to be helpless. Eli's voice softened by almost nothing. Then don't train like someone who wants power. Train like someone who wants one chance. She lifted the gun again. This time she did not close her eyes. Days began to take shape. Mornings started with training. Nora learned the safe room codes, emergency routes, how to read a room, how to watch hands instead of faces, how to keep Willa between herself and an exit. She learned basic first aid from Dr. Pierce, including what to do if Willa had chest pain, dizziness, or trouble breathing. She learned which guards were assigned to which wings. She learned that Eli drank black coffee, hated wasted motion, and trusted almost no one. Afternoons belonged to Willa. Those hours changed the house. With Nora, Willa laughed more. She read aloud in funny voices. She asked questions no adult answered quickly enough. She showed Nora the greenhouse where Evelyn had once grown tomatoes. She dragged her through the library, the music room, the garden paths, and finally, with great ceremony, to the art studio. The studio sat beneath a glass ceiling in the west wing, flooded with winter light. Canvases leaned against every wall. Paint jars lined the shelves. Brushes stood in cups like bouquets. The room smelled of oil paint, lavender soap, and dust warmed by sun. A woman with silver hair stood near the windows cleaning a brush. This is Miss Clara, Willa announced. She taught Mommy to paint. Clara turned. Her face was lined and kind, her brown eyes sharp with quiet understanding. And you must be Nora, she said. Nora smiled politely. I suppose everyone knows who I am by now. In this house, news travels without walking. Willa pulled Nora toward an easel. I want to show you my angels. The painting was unfinished, but it took Nora's breath. A small girl stood in the center of a dark forest. Around her were angels with black wings. Not evil, not monstrous. Beautiful in a bruised way. Their feathers looked smoke-stained, their faces tired, their hands protective. Nora stepped closer. Why are their wings black? Willa picked up a brush. Mommy said some angels have to go into scary places. Clara grew still by the window. Willa painted a careful line of black along one wing. They fight monsters. They walk through smoke. They get dirt and ashes on them. But that doesn't mean they are bad. Nora looked at the angels. And who are they protecting? Me. The answer was simple. Then Willa added, Daddy has black wings. Nora's heart gave a slow, painful beat. Through the glass, she could see Mason in the garden below speaking to two men in dark coats. His face was hard, his posture controlled, his world carried in silence around him. Willa followed her gaze. People think Daddy is scary. He is scary. Willa nodded, but not to me. Nora did not know what to say. Clara spoke softly. Children often see the truth before they learn to fear it. That night, Nora found Mason in his study. She had not meant to confront him. She had gone looking for Mrs. Bell and taken a wrong turn, or perhaps that was what she told herself. The study door was open. Mason stood beside a cabinet pouring whiskey into a glass he had not yet drunk. He looked up. "You're lost." "Maybe. That means yes." She stepped inside. The study was dark wood leather books and rain sliding down tall windows. It suited him too well. I saw Willa's paintings. His hand stilled on the glass. She shows them to people she trusts. She paints angels with black wings. I know. She thinks that's you. Mason's expression did not change. It is kinder than what most people call me. Nora moved farther into the room. She hears more than you think. His eyes sharpened. She is kept away from my business. No, she is kept away from the details. That's different. The room tightened. Mason set the glass down. "Careful, Nora." The warning was quiet. It worked. She felt fear rise. Then she thought of Willa's little hand holding a paintbrush, turning darkness into something she could survive. Nora forced herself not to step back. "You hired me to protect her." "Yes." "Then let me protect more than her body." Mason said nothing. "She knows there are monsters," Nora continued. "She knows you fight them. But she shouldn't have to build her whole childhood around understanding why the people who love her are covered in blood." His jaw hardened. "You think I don't know that? I think you know it and hate it. That doesn't make it less true." For a long moment, the only sound was rain against the windows. Then Mason picked up the whiskey glass and stared into it. "Evelyn used to say I carried winter into every room." Nora softened despite herself. "Your wife?" He nodded. "She was the only person who could say things like that and make me want to be better instead of crueler." Nora stayed quiet. Mason looked toward the fireplace where the flames moved low and gold. She loved that studio. Painted terrible flowers. Absolutely terrible. His mouth almost smiled. She said beauty did not need permission to exist. "She sounds brave." She was light. The words came out rougher than the rest. Nora watched him grip the glass. This was not the Mafia boss the city whispered about. This was a widower standing in the wreckage of a memory. "She died when Willa was born," he said. Her heart failed. "I had the best doctors in the city. I had men praying who had not spoken to God since childhood. I offered money, blood, anything." He looked at Nora. Nothing mattered. Nora's voice was quiet. "So you built walls." "I built protection. You built grief out of stone and put your daughter inside it." His eyes flashed. Eli would have told her she had a death wish. Maybe she did, but Mason did not explode. He only looked at her like the words had struck somewhere too deep for anger to reach. "You speak very freely for someone who feared me 2 days ago. I still fear you. And yet Willa doesn't need everyone in this house to fear you more than they love her." Mason looked away first. That felt impossible. After that night, something shifted. Not quickly. Not softly. Mason Callahan did not transform because a woman challenged him in a study. Men like him did not shed darkness like a coat, but he began to listen. The next afternoon, Willa was allowed to eat lunch in the greenhouse instead of the formal dining room. 2 guards stood farther away than usual. Mason sat at the small iron table, stiff and uncomfortable among Evelyn's old plants, while Willa placed a napkin over his lap and declared he looked like a statue who had been invited to tea. Nora laughed. Mason looked offended. Willa giggled so hard Dr. Pierce had to remind her to breathe. A few days later, Mason let Willa walk the garden path after sunset. Not alone. Never alone. But without the suffocating ring of guards close enough to steal the air. Nora walked on one side of her, Mason on the other. Willa held both their hands and swung between them once, then gasped with delight when Mason actually allowed it. "You're heavy bird," he said. "I am delicate. You are bossy. You are taller than necessary." Nora covered her mouth. Mason glanced at her. Something funny. Number. You're lying. Yes. His eyes warmed for half a second. Those moments were dangerous in a different way. Nora began noticing things she did not want to notice. Mason always entered a room by checking the corners first. He never sat with his back to a door. He drank coffee late at night but rarely finished whiskey when Willa was nearby. He touched Evelyn's portrait when he passed it, not every time, but often enough that Nora knew it was not accidental, and he noticed her too. When Nora forgot breakfast, a plate appeared in the art studio. When she trained too hard and bruised her wrist, a jar of ointment waited outside her door. When Dr. Pierce examined the lump she had been ignoring for weeks, Mason did not ask for details, but the best specialist in Illinois was already scheduled before Nora finished buttoning her coat. The lump was benign. Nora cried in the bathroom afterward with the water running so no one would hear. Mason heard anyway. He was waiting in the hall when she came out. She wiped her face quickly. I'm fine. I know. Then why are you standing there? Because people who are fine sometimes still need someone outside the door. She stared at him. He looked uncomfortable with his own kindness. That made it worse. Thank you, she said. He nodded. You don't have to keep saving me, she added. Mason's gaze held hers. I am not saving you. No, I am removing obstacles. You are doing the living. She did not know what to do with that. So she walked away before her heart did something foolish. The trouble arrived quietly, as trouble often did in that house. Eli began receiving more calls. Mason left at odd hours and returned with blood on his cuff once, though none of it seemed to be his. Guards doubled near the service entrance. Mrs. Bell stopped letting Willa near windows after dusk. Clara canceled 2 art lessons without explanation. One night, Nora was reading to Willa when voices carried through the partially open door. Eli's voice first. Rourke is testing the edges. Mason answered low. Let him. He's been asking about the girl. Silence. Nora stopped reading. Willa looked at her. What is it? Nothing. But Willa's eyes had already gone to the door. Mason's voice came again, colder than Nora had ever heard it. If Vincent Rourke speaks my daughter's name again, cut the tongue from the man who carries the message. Willa's fingers tightened around the blanket. Nora closed the book. Hey, she said softly, look at me. Willa did. Want to paint tomorrow? The child nodded, but the brightness was gone from her face. After Willa fell asleep, Nora found Mason in the hall. He knew from her face that she had heard. Who is Vincent Rourke? Mason's expression closed. No one you need to know. If he is asking about Willa, that is not true. Eli stood a few steps behind him, watching closely. Mason looked tired. More than tired. Worn thin at the edges. He was once an ally, Mason said. Now he is a man who believes I have become weak. Because of Willa. Because I love her. Nora absorbed that. In Mason's world, love was not private. It was a target, painted in blood. And because of me, she asked. Mason did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. A chill moved through her. He knows my name. Eli spoke this time. Not yet, but he knows someone new is close to the child. Nora looked toward Willa's bedroom door. A different kind of fear filled her now. Not fear for herself, that she knew how to carry. This was sharper. Mason saw it. You can still leave, he said. The words were controlled, but something underneath them was not. Nora turned back to him. Is that what you want? No. The answer came too fast, too honest. The hallway fell silent. Nora felt Eli politely look anywhere else. Mason's eyes stayed on hers. But I will not pretend this house is safe, because you have started to feel at home in it. Nora's heart beat once hard. Home. She had not used that word. Yet somehow he had. She looked at Willa's door again, then at the man standing between love and war with both hands already scarred. I'm not leaving her. Mason's jaw tightened, not with anger this time, with something closer to relief. Nora stepped closer and lowered her voice. But you need to stop making decisions about Willa from fear alone. She feels it, she paints it, she dreams it. If danger is coming, then help me make her brave. Don't just make her hidden. For a long moment, Mason said nothing. Then he nodded once. It was not surrender. From him, it was almost a vow. The next morning, Willa painted a new canvas. Nora stood behind her, braiding her hair loosely while Clara sorted brushes near the window. The painting showed a little girl in yellow standing in the snow. Behind her stood a woman with tired green eyes and pale wings touched by gold. Beside them stood a tall man with black wings spread wide, shielding them both from a wolf at the edge of the trees. The wolf's eyes were bright blue. Nora stared at it. "Willa," she said carefully. "Have you seen that wolf before?" Willa kept painting. "In my dream." Clara's face had gone pale. "What happened in the dream?" Nora asked. Willa dipped her brush into black paint. The wolf smiled at Daddy. Her small hand moved across the canvas, darkening the sky. Then he looked at me. Nora felt the air change behind her before she turned. Mason stood in the doorway, his gaze fixed on the painted wolf. For a moment, he did not look like a father or a king. He looked like a man recognizing a threat that had already entered the room. Mason stood in the doorway of the art studio, staring at the painted wolf as if the canvas had spoken a name no one wanted to hear. Willa kept painting, unaware of the silence that had fallen behind her. Her brush moved carefully along the wolf's mouth, shaping it into something too close to a smile. The creature stood at the edge of the trees in her picture, half hidden by shadows, its blue eyes fixed not on the little girl but on the man with black wings. Nora felt Mason beside her before he stepped fully into the room. He did not rush to the painting. He did not ask Willa to stop. He only came closer, each footstep quiet on the wooden floor. "Bird," he said softly. Willa looked over her shoulder. "Yes, Daddy. Tell me about the wolf." She tilted her head as if surprised he did not understand. "He waits outside." Mason's face did not change, but Nora saw the tendon in his jaw tighten. "Outside where?" "The house." Clara's hand moved to her throat. Nora stayed very still. Willa dipped the brush into gray paint. "He doesn't come in yet because the black-winged angel watches him. But he knows a door. I don't like him." Mason looked at Eli, who had appeared in the hall without making a sound. Eli's face went hard. Willa turned back to the canvas. "I don't want to paint him anymore." Nora crossed the room at once and knelt beside her. "Then don't. But the dream keeps showing him." Nora took the brush gently from Willa's hand and placed it on the tray. "Dreams don't get to boss you around." Willa considered that. "Daddy does." Mason's mouth twitched faintly despite the tension in the room. "Nora is correct," he said. "In this case, dreams do not outrank her." Willa smiled a little, but her eyes were tired. That night, the house changed again. Not in ways a stranger would notice. The chandeliers still glowed. Dinner was still served on time. Mrs. Bell still moved through the halls with quiet grace. But Nora felt the shift in the air. Guards stood closer to doors. Eli spoke into his phone in short, clipped sentences. Mason took 3 calls during dinner and returned each time with less warmth in his face. Willa noticed too. Children always noticed the things adults tried to hide. She pushed her carrots around her plate and watched her father. "Daddy." Mason looked up. "Yes, Bird? Are you mad at the wolf?" A silence fell over the table. Nora lowered her fork. Mason leaned back slowly. "I'm not mad at anyone you need to worry about." "That means yes." Eli coughed once near the wall. Nora pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. Mason looked at his daughter with weary affection. "You are spending too much time with Nora." Willa brightened. "Thank you." That was not praise. It sounded like praise. For a moment, the room breathed again. Then Willa's smile faded and she touched her chest. Nora saw it first. The small tightening of the mouth. The way Willa's shoulders lifted as if breathing had become work. The sudden whiteness around her lips. "Nora," Willa whispered. Nora was already moving. She reached Willa before the child could slide from the chair. "Mason." One word. The whole room snapped into motion. Mason came around the table fast. Eli was already calling Dr. Pierce. Mrs. Bell appeared from nowhere with a blanket. Willa's hand clutched Nora's sleeve, her fingers cold and damp. "It hurts," Willa said. Nora knelt beside the chair and kept her voice calm even as fear climbed her throat. "Look at me, sweetheart, just me. Breathe in through your nose." Willa tried. Her breath hitched. "That's good, again." Mason crouched on the other side, his face carved from terror held too tightly. "Willa." Nora looked at him sharply. "Don't scare her." Eli went still. Mason's eyes flashed to Nora, but only for a second. Then he softened his voice with visible effort. Little Bird listened to Nora. Willa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying." "I know," Nora whispered. "You're doing so well." Dr. Pierce arrived in under 5 minutes, but those minutes stretched like a lifetime. He checked Willa's heart, her pulse, her oxygen, his calm face growing more serious with each measurement. "She has a fever," he said, "and her rhythm is unstable." Mason stood so quickly the chair behind him scraped the floor. "Fix it." "I'm treating it now." "Fix it faster." Dr. Pierce looked up, not afraid, but firm. Mason stepped back. Mason did not move. Nora did. She stood and placed herself between him and the doctor. It was not a challenge. Not exactly. It was a reminder. Willa could see him. Mason looked down at Nora, breathing hard. For a second, she saw the violence in him searching for somewhere to go. Then his gaze moved past her to Willa, who was watching him with frightened eyes. He stepped back. Dr. Pierce gave medication and ordered Willa moved to her room. Mason carried her himself, one arm beneath her knees, one behind her back, holding her so carefully that Nora's heart twisted. In Willa's bedroom, monitors were connected. A cool cloth was placed on her forehead. Nora sat beside her and held her hand while Dr. Pierce worked. Mason stood near the foot of the bed, silent and pale. Hours passed. The fever rose, then slowly began to break. Willa drifted in and out of sleep, whispering for water for Nora, for her father. Each time she woke, Nora was there. Mason was there too, though he stayed in the shadows as if afraid his fear would crowd the room. Near dawn, Dr. Pierce finally exhaled. "She is stable for now." Mason's eyes closed. "For now," he repeated. Pierce removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We cannot wait 2 months. The surgery needs to be moved up." "How soon?" 3 weeks at most." Nora's hand tightened around Willa's. Mason stared at the doctor. "And if she has another episode before then?" Pierce did not answer immediately. That was enough. Mason left the room without a word. Nora found him in the hallway a few minutes later, one hand braced against the wall, head bowed. He had faced men with guns, judges with indictments, rivals with armies. But here, outside his daughter's bedroom, he looked like a man stripped of every weapon. "Mason." He did not turn. "I can order a room silent," he said. "I can make a man disappear before breakfast. I can move money, police, witnesses, entire shipments with one phone call." His voice broke low in his chest. "But I cannot command her heart to keep beating." Nora stood beside him. There were no words that could fix that kind of helplessness, so she did not offer any. She reached for his hand. At first, Mason went still. His fingers were cold, his knuckles rough, his palm larger than hers by far. Then slowly he closed his hand around hers. For a long time they stood like that in the dim corridor while Willa slept behind the door. The house did not sleep after that. Surgery plans took over the estate. Dr. Pierce made calls to Boston, New York, Cleveland. Mason purchased equipment before anyone had asked for it. A surgical team was assembled under contract so strict Nora was sure that no one would ever speak of the place again. And beneath it all, Vincent Rourke moved. Eli discovered the first leak 2 days later. A delivery manifest from the medical wing had been copied. Then a guard rotation schedule disappeared from a secure system. Then one of Willa's private nurses received a call from an unknown number asking about the date of the surgery and offering money for harmless information. Mason gathered his senior men in the study. Nora was not supposed to hear. But she was walking past with Willa's medicine when Mason's voice stopped her. "Someone inside this house is feeding him." No one answered. Eli spoke next. "It's not the outer staff. The information is too specific." "One of mine, then." Mason's voice was quiet. That made it worse. Nora stepped away from the door before she could hear more. She did not want secrets. She had enough fear already, but fear had a way of finding her. That afternoon, she took Willa to a medical appointment in a private clinic Mason controlled through enough layers that his name appeared nowhere. The clinic was clean, quiet, and nearly empty. 2 guards stood near the elevator. Eli waited near the car. Nora stayed beside Willa the entire time. Afterward, while Willa slept in the back seat on the ride home, Eli took a call and his expression changed. He looked at the driver. "Pull over at the next secure point." Nora sat straighter. "What is it?" Eli did not answer. The SUV turned into the parking lot of a closed church. Another Callahan vehicle pulled in behind them. Eli looked at Nora. "Stay with Willa." Eli. His eyes moved to the side mirror. "Your ex is across the street." The air left Nora's lungs. She looked through the tinted window. Tyler Reed stood under the awning of a shuttered convenience store, soaked from the rain, thinner than she remembered, his face pale and nervous. He kept looking left and right as if expecting the street itself to bite him. Nora's stomach twisted. "What does he want?" Eli's mouth hardened. "That is what I'm trying to decide." Tyler raised both hands slightly when he saw Eli get out of the SUV. He said something Nora could not hear. Eli listened, then looked back at the car. Nora already knew. "He asked for me." Eli opened the door and leaned in. "You do not have to speak to him." Willa slept on her cheek, pressed against her stuffed rabbit. Nora looked at Tyler again. Years ago, she had loved that man. Or thought she did. He had kissed her forehead while stealing her future. He had called her brave while leaving her with debt. What if he has information? Then I can take it from him. Nora looked at Eli. Alive. Eli did not blink. That depends on him. Nora stepped out. Eli moved with her close enough to intervene. Tyler flinched when she approached. Good, Nora thought. He should. "Nora," he said. His voice carried the same old softness. It made her skin crawl now. "What do you want?" "I didn't have a choice." She laughed once. "You always start there." He swallowed. "There are people asking about you." Rourke. Tyler's eyes widened, then dropped. So it was true. He said he'd clear everything. Tyler whispered. "Your loan." "My problems, all of it." "You mean the loan you left me with?" I was desperate. "So was I." "You still left." Rain dripped from the awning behind him. Tyler looked over her shoulder at Eli and lowered his voice. "He knows you are close to the girl. He knows Callahan trusts you. They only need one thing." Nora felt cold spread through her chest. What thing? Tyler would not meet her eyes. A door. During the transfer for the surgery. One service door. Unlocked for 5 minutes. You don't even have to be there when it happens. Nora stared at him. For one suspended moment, there was no rain, no traffic, no Eli behind her, no sleeping child in the SUV. Only the sound of Willa in the alley, whispering "Daddy" through blue lips. Tyler rushed on. "You could leave after. They'll give you money, real money, enough to disappear." "Nora, these people are not your family." The slap came before she thought about it. Tyler's head snapped to the side. Eli moved half a step, then stopped. Nora's hand stung. "You don't get to say that word to me." Tyler touched his cheek, eyes wet with fear and shame. "They'll kill me if I go back with nothing." Nora leaned closer. "Then tell them you found out something useful." "What?" She looked him dead in the eye. "Tell them the waitress said no." She turned and walked back to the SUV. Her legs did not start shaking until the door closed. Willa stirred in her sleep and murmured, "Angel." Nora touched her hair. "I'm here." She did not tell Mason immediately. That was her mistake. For 2 hours, the secret sat inside her like a stone. She told herself she was thinking. She told herself she needed to decide how to explain it. She told herself Tyler was worthless, but not worth dying over. The truth was worse. She was afraid of what Mason would become when he heard. She found him after dinner in the greenhouse. The glass walls were dark with night. Snow had begun to fall lightly outside, melting as soon as it touched the ground. Evelyn's old tomato vines had been replaced with winter herbs, but the air still smelled faintly green and alive. Mason stood near the far window, phone in hand. He looked at Nora's face and ended the call without saying goodbye. What happened? She almost smiled at that. He always knew. Tyler came to the clinic. Mason went very still. You're Tyler. He was never mine. What did he want? Nora forced herself to hold his gaze. Rourke sent him. They wanted me to leave a service door unlocked during Willa's surgery transfer. The silence that followed had weight. Mason set the phone down on the iron table. Slowly. Too slowly. And you are telling me this now. I should have told you sooner. Yes. His voice was flat. I know. Why didn't you? Because I knew you would kill him. Mason stepped toward her. He helped Rourke reach you. He was used. He chose. He is weak. Mason's eyes were cold enough to freeze blood. Weak men open doors for wolves. Nora took a breath. He deserves prison. He deserves consequences. He deserves to answer for what he did to me and what he tried to do to Willa. Then we agree. No, she said, because he does not deserve to be dragged into a basement and erased. Mason looked at her as if she had placed a hand against the darkest part of him and pushed. This is not a courtroom, Nora. No, it is your daughter's home. His face changed. She stepped closer even though every instinct told her not to. If you kill everyone who scares you, what will be left when Willa looks at you? Mason's voice lowered. Do not use my daughter as a leash. I'm not. I'm using her as a mirror. The words struck. For a moment, Nora thought he would walk away, or shout, or tell her she had forgotten who he was. Instead, he turned his head toward the dark garden and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the fury had not vanished. It had been chained. He picked up his phone and called Eli. Find Tyler Reed. Alive. Deliver him to federal fraud investigators with every file we have on him. Make sure Rourke knows he talked. A pause. No, alive means breathing Eli. He ended the call. Nora stared at him. Mason looked back. Do not mistake restraint for forgiveness. I won't. And do not hide things from me again. I won't. The snow thickened against the glass. For the first time, Mason looked less like a man winning a war, and more like a man surviving himself. Nora's voice softened. Thank you. He laughed under his breath without humor. For not killing a man. For listening. Mason studied her. I don't listen. You just did. That may have been an accident. Then have more accidents. Something almost gentle moved through his eyes. Nora should have left. Instead, she stayed. The greenhouse was quiet around them, warm against the winter pressing outside. Mason looked at her with an expression she had started to recognize and fear. Not hunger alone. Not gratitude. Something deeper. Something that asked without words whether she was going to step closer or run. Nora did neither. She stood still and let him come to her. He raised one hand slowly enough that she could refuse and touched her cheek with the backs of his fingers. His hand was warm now. Careful. You make me feel watched, he said. Nora's breath caught. That sounds terrible. It is. Then stop looking. I tried. The honesty of it moved through her like heat. Mason. He lowered his forehead close to hers, not touching yet. I know what I am. So do I. You should be more afraid. I am afraid. His eyes searched hers, but not enough to leave. No. The kiss was quiet. Not gentle exactly, because nothing about Mason felt simple enough for that word, but it was restrained. Careful. A man used to taking chose instead to ask with every inch he did not claim. Nora answered him. For a moment, the snow, the walls, the guns, the sickness, the enemies, the whole brutal world outside the glass fell away. There was only warmth. His hand at her cheek, her fingers against the front of his shirt. Two lonely people standing in a room where dead love had once grown tomatoes, discovering that grief did not have to be the last thing planted there. When they parted, Mason kept his eyes closed for 1 second longer than necessary. Nora whispered. This complicates things. His mouth almost curved. Everything in my life is complicated. That is not comforting. I am rarely comforting. No, she said, but you are learning. The next morning at breakfast, Willa noticed immediately. She sat between them in her yellow sweater, swinging her feet beneath the chair, looking from Nora to Mason with bright suspicion. Daddy. Mason did not look up from his coffee. Yes. Did you finally figure out Nora is pretty? Nora choked on her orange juice. Eli turned sharply toward the window. Mason froze with the coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Willa smiled pleased with the chaos. Mommy said lonely hearts are like flowers in winter. They need warm hands. The room fell silent. Mason lowered the cup. Nora looked at Willa and felt her chest ache. Your mommy said beautiful things. Willa nodded. She had good ideas. Mason's gaze moved to Evelyn's empty chair at the far end of the table, then back to Nora. Yes, he said quietly. She did. The peace lasted until night. At 2:13 in the morning, the power died. Only for 7 seconds. Nora woke at once. No light. No hum from the vents. No soft electronic pulse from the security panel beside her door. Then everything came back. The lights flickered on. An alarm began to scream. Red lights flashed along the baseboards. From the connecting room, Willa cried out. Nora was out of bed before thought formed. She grabbed the emergency bag from the closet and ran through the inner door. Willa stood in the middle of her room in white pajamas, barefoot, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Angel. Nora crossed to her comm because panic had no room. I'm here. Shoes. Willa's hand shook too hard to manage them. Nora slipped the shoes on her feet, grabbed her coat, and pulled her close. A voice crackled through the wall speaker. Eli. Breach at East Service Gate. Internal systems compromised. Safe room now. Nora's blood went cold. Internal. That meant the wolf had found a door. She lifted Willa into her arms. The child was heavier than she looked, warm and trembling. What about Daddy? He knows where to find us. Gunfire cracked somewhere far away. Willa buried her face in Nora's neck. Nora ran. The hallway outside was washed in red light. Guards shouted from distant corridors. Doors slammed. The house that had once seemed too large now felt like a maze closing in on itself. Nora reached the hidden wall panel and pressed her hand to the release. Nothing. For one impossible second, the wall did not move. No, she breathed. She tried again. The panel flashed red. Willa whimpered. Nora remembered Eli's training. If the panel fails manual release beneath the molding. Left side, knee height. She dropped to the floor, keeping one arm around Willa, and found the hidden latch with shaking fingers. The wall slid open. Cold air rushed from the safe room. Nora pushed Willa inside first. Go to the corner, behind the bed. Willa obeyed, crying silently now, which frightened Nora more than sobbing would have. Nora hit the red button. The steel door began to close. Slow. Too slow. Footsteps pounded at the end of the hall. Not guards. Too uneven. Too fast. Nora reached for the emergency flashlight from the wall rack and turned toward the opening. A man appeared in the red light, face-covered gun in hand. The steel door was halfway closed. Nora slammed her palm against the close control, willing it faster. The man lunged. His hand shot through the narrowing gap and caught the edge of the door. Willa screamed behind her. Nora raised the flashlight with both hands as the steel door shuddered against the force trying to pull it open. The man in the mask wedged one shoulder through the gap. His gloved fingers clawed at the edge of the door, fighting the motor. Red emergency lights flashed across his face, turning his eyes black 1 second and crimson the next. Behind Nora, Willa screamed. Nora did not look back. Eli's voice cut through her memory. Keep the child behind you. Control the space. Buy time. Time. 10 seconds. That was all she needed. The intruder forced another inch of the door open. Nora swung the flashlight. It hit his wrist with a sharp crack. The man cursed and loosened his grip, but not enough. He shoved forward, catching Nora by the shoulder. Pain exploded down her arm as he slammed her against the wall. The flashlight fell from her hand and rolled across the floor. Willa cried. Stay back. Nora gasped. The man reached for the gun at his side. Nora moved before fear could stop her. She grabbed the emergency radio from the wall shelf and smashed it into his face. He stumbled and the door groaned, trying again to close. Nora threw her weight against him, driving her elbow into his ribs the way Eli had shown her. He was stronger, much stronger. He caught her hair and yanked her sideways. Pain tore across her scalp. She hit the floor hard, shoulder-first breath, leaving her in a broken sound. Willa was crying from behind the bed, small hands covering her mouth. The man lifted his gun, not at Nora, at Willa. Something in Nora went silent. The fear vanished. The pain vanished. The whole world narrowed to the space between that weapon and the child. Nora launched herself at his legs. The shot went wild, cracking into the concrete wall. Willa screamed again. Nora clung to the man's knee with everything she had. He kicked her once, twice, but she would not let go. "You stupid woman," he snarled. Nora tasted blood. "Get away from her." He raised the gun toward Nora this time. Then the hallway outside erupted. A sound like thunder split the air. The intruder jerked backward, not from Nora, but from something that struck the wall beside his head and showered dust across his mask. Mason's voice filled the doorway. "Drop it." The man froze. Nora looked up. Mason stood in the hall beyond the half-open door, gun steady in both hands. His face was not angry. Anger was too small for what lived there. He looked carved from night itself, every merciful part of him locked away behind the eyes of a father who had heard his daughter scream. Eli stood behind him with two guards' weapons raised. The intruder tightened his grip on the gun. Mason's voice dropped. "Do not make me ask twice." The man looked at Willa behind the bed. That was his mistake. Mason fired. The shot struck the man's hand. The gun clattered across the safe room floor. Eli surged forward, dragging the intruder down before he could move again. The steel door stopped its struggle, whining softly as Eli disabled the motor and forced it open from the outside. Mason crossed the room in 3 strides. Willa. The child ran to him. He dropped to his knees and pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her small body as if he could shield her from every evil that had already touched the room. "Daddy," she sobbed. "I'm here. I'm here." Nora tried to sit up and failed. Her shoulder burned. Blood slid warm down her forearm from a cut she had not noticed. Her ribs throbbed with every breath. Willa lifted her tear-streaked face. "Angel is hurt." Mason turned. The moment he saw Nora on the floor, something changed in his eyes. For years, every fear in him had belonged to one person. Willa, only Willa. Now another fear arrived beside it. He reached Nora so quickly she barely saw him move. "Where are you hit?" "I'm not shot." "Where are you hurt?" "Mason, I'm fine." His hand hovered over the blood on her arm, trembling with restraint. "You are bleeding. It's a cut." His eyes searched her face, then her body, as if refusing to trust her answer. Nora gave him a weak smile. "I bought the 10 seconds. Mason's jaw tightened. Behind him, Eli dragged the intruder to his knees and tore off the mask. The room went quiet. The man was not a stranger. He was Harris, one of Mason's senior guards. Nora had seen him at doors and corridors beside the driveway when Willa walked in the garden. He had once handed Willa a fallen ribbon from her hair. He had smiled when she thanked him. Mason stood slowly. Willa clung to Nora now, shaking against her side. Mason placed himself between them and Harris, his body blocking the sight of the traitor as much as the threat. Harris spat blood onto the floor and smiled. "She made you slow," he said. No one spoke. Harris looked past Mason toward Nora. "A waitress. A stray off the street. You let her sleep beside your daughter. You let her whisper in your ear." The old Mason Callahan would have buried her before breakfast just for knowing too much. Mason said nothing. Harris laughed rough and bitter. "Rourke was right. You got soft." Eli pressed the gun harder against the back of Harris's neck. Mason lifted one hand. Eli froze. The room waited for the old Mason, the man who answered betrayal with blood. The man the city feared because mercy had never been part of his language. Mason looked at Willa first. She was hiding her face against Nora, but she could still hear everything. Then he looked at Nora. Blood on her sleeve. Bruise forming along her cheek. Chin lifted despite the pain. The woman who had stood between his child and a bullet. Mason turned back to Harris. "No," he said quietly. "They did not make me soft." Harris's smile faltered. "They reminded me why I became dangerous. For a second, Nora thought he might still do it. End the man right there on the safe room floor. Instead, Mason stepped back. Take him alive. Eli's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Alive. Mason's eyes did not leave Harris. He talks first, then he answers for every door he opened. Eli nodded and hauled Harris to his feet. Harris struggled once. Mason leaned close enough that only those nearby could hear. You touched my daughter's fear tonight. I will not waste that on a quick death of the body. You will give me Rourke. You will give me his men, his money, his roots, and every name that bought a piece of you. Harris went pale. Then Eli dragged him out. The safe room was left with ringing silence. Dr. Pierce arrived minutes later, coat thrown over sleeping clothes, his medical bag in hand, and 2 nurses behind him. He looked first at Willa, then at Nora, then at Mason. What happened? Mason's voice was flat. Breach. Internal betrayal. She was nearly taken. Dr. Pierce's face tightened. He knelt beside Willa and checked her pulse. The child sat on the bed now, wrapped in a blanket, one hand gripping Nora's good hand, the other clutching her stuffed rabbit so tightly its ear bent sideways. Chest pain, he asked gently. Willa nodded. Nora's heart dropped. Mason went still. Dr. Pierce moved faster. Stethoscope. Monitor. Oxygen. Commands given in a low, controlled voice. Willa tried to be brave, but her lips had gone pale again, and her breathing came shallow. Nora forgot her own pain. Look at me, Willa. The child obeyed. That's it. You're safe. Breathe with me. Mason stood on the other side, every muscle locked. Dr. Pierce watched the monitor, and the calm mask he wore began to crack. Mason. One word. Enough. Mason's face turned gray. Number. We cannot wait. No. We have the surgical team on site. The equipment is ready. We moved everything up because of the fever. You know this. She just survived an attack, and her heart is now under too much strain because of it. Willa looked between them, frightened. Nora squeezed her hand. Raymond Mason said. And for the first time, Nora heard him use the doctor's first name. Tell me there is another way. Dr. Pierce's eyes softened. There is not. The world seemed to narrow around the small bed. Willa's eyes filled again, but she did not cry. Daddy. Mason knelt beside her. I'm right here. Is it time to fix my heart? Mason could not answer. Nora did. Yes, sweetheart. Willa swallowed. Will it hurt? They'll make you sleep first, Dr. Pierce said gently. When you wake up, the worst part will be over. Willa looked at Mason. You'll stay. His voice came rough. Every second. Then she looked at Nora. You too. Nora bent and kissed her forehead. Cross my heart. Willa lifted their joined hands and placed Nora's fingers in Mason's. Both, she whispered. Mason's hand closed around Nora's, strong and shaking. The medical team moved with quiet urgency. Willa was carried through the hidden corridor toward the private surgical wing that Mason had built years ago and prayed never to use. The halls were bright now. Guards stood at every turn, faces grim. The whole house seemed to hold its breath as the child passed. At the surgical doors, Willa reached for Mason again. He bent close. She touched the scar near his eyebrow with small fingers. Don't be scary while I'm sleeping. His mouth trembled. I'll try. Promise. I promise. She turned to Nora. Take care of Daddy. He gets lost when he's scared. Nora's eyes burned. I know. Willa gave the smallest smile. Black wings still count. Then Dr. Pierce nodded and the doors closed. Mason stared at them as if he could force them open with will alone. Nora stood beside him, her bandaged arm held close to her body, her ribs aching, her heart beating somewhere in her throat. Around them, men moved in disciplined silence. Phones buzzed. Eli came and went. Orders were passed. The estate was not calm, only controlled. Mason did not move from the doors. Not for 1 hour. Not for 2. At some point, Mrs. Bell brought coffee. No one drank. Clara came with Willa's stuffed rabbit and sat silently in a chair near the wall, tears sliding down her lined face. Eli appeared with blood on one cuff and a folder in his hand. He looked at Nora first, then at Mason. "We have Rourke's location." Mason's head turned slowly. Eli continued. "Harris gave up 3 safe houses. Rourke is at the warehouse on Cicero with 20 men. He thinks the attack is still unfolding. He does not know we have Harris alive." The hallway changed. Every guard nearby sensed it. This was the window. The moment men like Mason were made for. Strike while the enemy was exposed. End the threat. Reclaim fear. Make the city remember. Mason looked at the surgical doors, then at Eli. How certain? Certain enough. A long silence followed. Nora knew what the old Mason would do. Everyone did. He would leave death outside the operating room and carry it across Chicago like a torch. He would destroy Rourke with his own hands because that was the language his world understood. Eli waited. Mason, Nora said softly. He looked at her. She did not tell him what was right. She did not tell him what Willa needed in some grand way. She only spoke the one truth that mattered. "If she wakes up and you're gone, she'll think the fear took you." The words landed harder than any plea. Mason's face tightened. Eli shifted. "Boss, this chance may not come again." Mason looked at his oldest friend. For a second, the old violence burned bright in him. Nora saw it. Felt it. The need to move, strike, punish, erase. Then his eyes went back to the surgical doors. Number. Eli stared. Mason lowered himself into the chair beside Nora. "My daughter wakes up with her father here." The hallway went still. Eli's voice was quiet. "And Rourke." Mason took Nora's uninjured hand. "Rourke can learn what waiting feels like." Eli looked at him for one long moment. Then something like respect passed over his face. "I'll keep eyes on him. No reckless moves." "Understood." Eli. The right-hand man stopped. Mason's voice was low. "Thank you for getting to the safe room." Eli looked almost uncomfortable. "She bought the time." He nodded toward Nora. Then he left. Mason did not release Nora's hand. Hours moved strangely after that. Time became machines behind closed doors. Footsteps in the hall, coffee turning cold, whispered prayers from Mrs. Bell. Clara rubbing paint from her fingernails, though there was no paint there. Nora drifted once and woke with her head against Mason's shoulder. She tried to pull away. He tightened his hand around hers, not enough to trap her, just enough to say stay. So she did. At dawn, the light outside the high windows turned pale blue. Snow dusted the garden beyond the glass. The estate, so often filled with power and fear, looked almost gentle in the morning. The surgical doors opened. Dr. Pierce stepped out. His hair was damp with sweat. His mask hung loose around his neck. His face was exhausted in a way Nora had seen only on people who had wrestled with death and not yet looked down to see if they were wounded. Mason stood. Nora stood beside him. No one breathed. Dr. Pierce looked at Mason. She made it. For a moment, Mason did not react. The words seemed to reach him slowly, as if they had to travel through years of grief before he could understand them. Then his eyes closed. His shoulders fell. Nora covered her mouth as a sob broke through her fingers. Mrs. Bell began to cry openly. Clara pressed both hands to her heart. One of the guards at the end of the hall turned away, pretending to adjust his earpiece. Mason did not cry. Not at first. He simply stood there, eyes closed. Nora's hand in his breathing like a man who had been underwater for 7 years and had finally reached air. Then one tear slipped down his face. He did not wipe it away. "When can I see her?" he asked. Soon, Dr. Pierce said. "She's weak. She'll need careful recovery. But the valve is functioning. Her rhythm is stable." Stable. The word became a blessing. When they were allowed into the recovery room, Willa looked impossibly small beneath the white blankets. Tubes and monitors surrounded her. Her face was pale lips, dry lashes resting against cheeks that finally held the faintest warmth. Mason approached as if entering a church. He sat beside her bed and took her hand in both of his. Nora stood back at first. Willa's eyes fluttered. Her voice came thin as thread. "Daddy." Mason leaned close. "I'm here, little bird." Did you stay? Every second. Willa's eyes moved slowly, searching. Nora came to the other side of the bed. I'm here. Willa's fingers reached for her. Nora took them. The child looked between them with heavy eyes. My heart. Mason's voice broke. It's fixed. Willa blinked once, then smiled small and tired. Good. Her eyes began to close again. Don't let the wolf in. Mason's expression darkened, but his voice stayed soft. He will never reach you. Willa sighed. Don't be too scary. Nora glanced at him. Mason looked at his daughter, then at Nora. I'll try. Willa seemed satisfied. She fell asleep holding both of their hands. Rourke did not fall that day in a blaze of gunfire. That was what he expected. That was what the old Mason might have given him. Instead, Mason sat beside Willa's bed and destroyed him with patience. Harris talked. Tyler had already been taken alive and placed where his fear had value. Rourke's accounts were traced, his police contacts exposed, his shipment routes leaked to men who hated him more than they feared him. His allies received proof that he had planned to use a sick child as leverage. And even in that world, some lines still carried consequences. By the time Rourke realized, Mason had not come because he had chosen not to. The walls around him had already moved. His money froze first. Then his men abandoned him. Then the safe houses emptied. Eli came to the recovery room 3 days later, standing just inside the door, while Willa slept, and Nora read quietly in the chair beside her. Mason looked up. Done. Eli nodded. Rourke is in custody of men who owe us old favors. He is alive. Nora glanced at Mason. He caught it. For now, Eli added. Mason's eyes went to Willa. The child slept with a bandage beneath her hospital gown, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. No theater, Mason said. Eli's face revealed nothing, but Nora saw surprise in the pause. No theater, he repeated. After he left, Nora closed the book. That was mercy. Mason looked tired, but calmer than she had ever seen him. No. What was it? Discipline. Nora considered that. I'll take it. His mouth softened. You always negotiate with monsters. Only the ones who make bad pancakes. That earned the faintest laugh. It sounded rusty. It sounded real. Recovery was not simple. Willa slept often. She grew frustrated when her body tired before her mind did. She cried the first time she could not walk the length of the room without help. She snapped at Dr. Pierce, apologized to him, then cried again because she hated being mean. Nora stayed through all of it. Mason stayed too awkward with the softer pains, but present. He learned to sit still while Willa slept. He learned to let Nora handle tears he could not fix with commands. He learned that a father did not always need to stand between his child and the world. Sometimes he needed to sit beside her and let her be angry that healing hurt. One afternoon, Willa woke to find Mason reading from the wrong page of her book. She frowned weakly. Daddy. He looked up. Yes, that is chapter 9. He checked the cover, then the page. I was close. We are on chapter 4. Nora smiled from the window seat. That is not close. Mason looked offended. I run a complicated organization. Willa yawned, but not a bookmark. Nora laughed, and after a second Mason did too. That laugh filled the room differently. Not loud, not grand, but it reached the corners. Spring arrived slowly. Snow disappeared from the garden. The trees along the drive grew green buds. The fountain in the courtyard was cleaned and started again, water spilling softly beneath the black raven crest. Willa's cheeks regained color. Her steps grew steadier. Her doctors allowed short walks, then longer ones, then supervised afternoons in the art studio. Nora's arm healed. A faint scar remained where the cut had been pale against her skin. Willa called it her angel mark. Nora told her not all scars needed fancy names. Willa told her she was wrong with the confidence of a child who had survived enough to have opinions about survival. Mason changed in quieter ways. He still held power. Men still lowered their eyes when he entered a room. Chicago did not suddenly become clean because Mason Callahan learned how to stay beside an operating room instead of chasing revenge. But the house changed. The guards stood farther from Willa when she painted. Dinner moved sometimes from the formal dining room to the greenhouse. Mason took Willa to see the lake at sunrise with Nora and 6 discreet guards positioned so far back the morning almost felt ordinary. One Sunday he made pancakes. They were terrible. Willa ate half of one out of loyalty. Nora took one bite and stared at him. Mason. He folded his arms. What? This is a crime. I have committed worse. I believe you. Willa giggled until Dr. Pierce told her to breathe. Later that day, Nora found Mason in the garden, standing before a bed of newly planted flowers Mrs. Bell had chosen. He was not on the phone, not giving orders, not watching the gate. Just standing there, sleeves rolled up, sunlight catching the silver at his temples. Nora came beside him. You look suspicious. I am looking at flowers. Exactly. He glanced at her. Willa wants tomatoes in the greenhouse. Evelyn's tomatoes. He nodded. Nora. The way he said her name made her look at him fully. I do not know how to be good. She stayed quiet. I know how to protect, how to punish, how to build walls. I know how to survive men who mistake love for weakness. His eyes moved toward the art studio where Willa sat near the glass painting with Clara. But I am trying to learn the rest. Nora's heart ached with the simplicity of it. I'm not asking you to become someone else overnight. I know. I'm asking you not to bury the better parts of yourself before they have a chance to breathe. He looked at her then, and the distance between them felt smaller than ever. You make it sound possible. Maybe it is. He reached for her hand. In the beginning, his touch had felt like danger. Now it felt like a choice he made carefully every time. Stay, he said. Nora smiled a little. That sounds like an order. It is not. Number. His thumb moved over her knuckles. It is me asking. That was the difference. Nora looked back at the house, the fortress, the palace. The place that had frightened her, fed her, tested her, and somehow become the nearest thing to home she had known since childhood. Then she looked at Willa through the glass. The girl glanced up as if she felt them watching and waved with her paintbrush. Nora waved back. Yes, she said. Mason exhaled almost too quietly to hear. Yes? Yes, I'll stay. He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her fingers. No audience. No grand vow. Just a man who had once ruled by fear, holding a woman's hand, as if it were the first honest thing he had ever been allowed to keep. Willa's final painting of that spring was larger than the others. She worked on it for days, refusing to let anyone see until it was finished. Clara helped carry it into the garden, where Mason, Nora, Mrs. Bell, Eli, and Dr. Pierce stood waiting, under a sky washed clean by afternoon rain. Willa stood proudly beside the covered canvas. No laughing, she warned. Eli nodded solemnly. I never laugh. Willa squinted at him. That is true. You should practice. Mrs. Bell hid a smile. Willa pulled the cloth away. The painting showed 3 figures standing at the edge of a city beneath a brightening sky. A little girl in yellow held a stuffed rabbit under one arm. Beside her stood a woman with tired green eyes and wings the color of dawn. Not pure white, not untouched, but bright where the light found them. On the other side stood a tall man with black wings spread wide. Some feathers were torn. Some were still dark with ash. But near the tips, gold had begun to appear. Behind them, far back in the trees, a wolf walked away. Mason said nothing. Nora looked at him and saw that his eyes had filled. Willa took his hand. See, Daddy. They're healing. Mason knelt in front of his daughter. His voice was rough. Are they? Willa nodded. Because they are not alone anymore. Nora looked away toward the garden before the tears could fall too freely. Eli cleared his throat. It is a very good painting, Miss Willa. Willa beamed. Thank you. I gave you wings too, but they are behind that tree because you are mysterious. Eli looked at the canvas, then at Mason. I accept. Mason laughed. This time no one looked surprised. That evening, Nora stood on the balcony outside her room, watching the garden settle into dusk. Chicago was far beyond the trees, still dangerous, still hungry, still full of alleys where people had to choose whether to keep walking. The door opened behind her. Mason stepped out. For a while, they stood side by side without speaking. Below them, Willa chased a floating soap bubble Mrs. Bell had blown from the garden steps. Clara scolded her gently not to run too fast. Eli pretended not to watch every movement. Mason's shoulder brushed Nora's. "The night you called, he said I thought I was coming to save my daughter from a stranger." Nora kept her eyes on Willa. "You did." "Number." He turned to her. "You were the stranger saving her from the dark." Nora swallowed. "I almost walked away, but you didn't." The memory returned. Rain, blue lips, the cracked phone, the last bus sighing at the curb. "No," she said, "I didn't." Mason looked down at his daughter alive and laughing beneath the first stars. That was the night everything changed. Nora slipped her hand into his. Below, Willa looked up and saw them. She waved both arms. "Daddy, Nora, look." She held up a bubble wand like a royal scepter. Mason lifted his hand. Nora laughed and waved too. For one quiet moment, the house did not feel like a fortress. It felt like a home. And Mason Callahan, the man Chicago once called the devil, stood in the fading light with Nora beside him, watching his daughter laugh as if the sound itself had opened every locked door in the world.